Hello, Amesy here of Amesy's Antics. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're well today because I have a sewing project to share with you today, and one that I have been dying to show you for a little while and dying to make really. I've had this pattern for a while and well, you can see the results. So in this week's video, I'm going to show you how to make a tie front maxi dress using the Dusky Rose pattern by Made label. And this is the results. Well, a little bit of a close-up of the results anyway. So if you would like to see the making of this stunning dress, then let's get sewing. So here is the Dusky Rose dress pattern. I have printed it, stuck it and then cut it out, and then my fabric of choice is this beautiful blue and white ditzy floral viscose fabric from Pound Fabrics, and it was only a few pounds per metre. I picked up 4 metres and only needed about 3 for the whole dress. I am making the dress in a size 10, so the amount you will need will depend on what size you are making. And then the first thing to do is obviously pin all the pattern pieces in place and then go ahead and cut them out. Now you do need to watch for the directional markings on the pattern piece because that will tell you which way the dress is going to drape, and I'm using a rotary cutter to cut out my pattern pieces, and I believe you have about 9 pattern pieces in total for the size 10. If you go a bit lower you have less pattern pieces because the frill doesn't need to be broken up into as many pieces. As well as the pattern pieces, you are also going to need some bias binding, and you really want this to match the fabric, so we're going to make our own using the fabric of choice. And luckily it is really easy to do, and this was my first time making bias binding and it came together really well. So mark out a square of 35 centimeters by 35 centimeters on your chosen material, making sure that it remains in line with the selvage edge, and then cut this out. Then you want to fold this diagonally to create a triangle shape and trim off any excess that comes over the edges, making sure everything is nice and even, and then cut down the middle of this to create 2 separate triangle pieces of material. And then you want to use a measuring tape or ruler to mark out a 3.5 centimeter wide strip all along that top edge of the triangle. So you want the longest edge, and this is cutting it on the bias. So once you have your strip, you want to cut it out and then use this as a template for the remaining of the material to get as many 3.5 centimeter wide strips as you can. Keep going. Obviously as it gets lower you'll get shorter strips, but that's fine because we can use it all to create one long piece of bias. And then to make one long continuous strip of bias binding, you want to place one of the strips right side up with another strip right side down, flipping this one 90 degrees and placing the 2 diagonal edges together. And then you want to sew from one corner to the other, which will then join them. You want to trim down the seam allowance, press it flat and trim any excess edges, and you should then get one continuous strip. Keep going along in this manner until you have a full long strip. Then I'm going to use a bias binder maker here. This is a 10mm one I believe, but I will link down the ones that I use below. These essentially fold in the raw edges of the bias strip to create that bias binding. You can do this without a bias binder maker, but it will take a little bit longer. Then you have your bias binding, it's time to set it aside. The first thing to make in this dress is the top part of it, and we're going to attach it all together with French seams, which give the dress a really nice polished finished professional look. So to do this you want to place the back panel and the front panel, or 2 front panels of the top together, wrong sides facing. Then you want to sew a 1 centimeter seam along the side seams and shoulder seams, trimming these down to less than ½ centimeter in that seam allowance before pressing them flat and folding the material so that they are right sides touching. Finger pressing this seam in place so that you have that neatly sewn edge right in that fold, and then sewing another 1 centimeter seam allowance sort of capturing all of that raw edge in, and then you should have a really nicely finished seam with all those raw edges inside, and it will look like this. And then it's time to concentrate on the tie part of the top. So using the back tie piece, we're just folding this in with a rolled hem of about ½ centimetre each fold, and that will give it a really nice finish. You then want to sew along this so that it is sewn in place and finished off the edge. Then you want to place down the back tie piece onto the front tie piece, marking 2.5 centimeters in from where it finishes, because this is where we're going to sort of attach it all together. Then place the back tie piece to one side, because we are going to concentrate on adding on the bias binding. The bias binding is going to add a really nice finished edge to the neckline and tie. So what you want to do is open up one of the raw edges of the bias binding where we have folded it, and then place it 1 centimeter overhang from that 2.5 centimeter mark we've just made. Then pin it all along that tie bit all the way around the neckline and back down to the other 2.5 centimeter mark, as you can see. And then we're going to go along the bottom bit of the tie as well with that bias binding. Before we do any sewing, we are going to fold the end of that bias binding in by ½ centimeter, and then refold that bottom folded edge back in, pressing it into place so that the raw edge of the bias binding is nicely contained in that end piece. Then we are going to sew a ½ centimeter seam all along where that bias binding is connecting to the front tie part, and then sew all the way along where it's pinned together until you reach the other side, remembering to back stitch at the start and end of each one, and sewing along the bias on the bottom part of the wave of the top as well. Next part is to finish off that tie front bit. So remember the back parts of the tie, we are now pinning them right sides together along the tie part of the front of the top, and as you can see, we're going to sew all the way around, following the seam from the bias binding, because this will go underneath that tie bit and really finish it off. And when you get to the corner part of the tie, we're just going to pivot the machine and follow it round to the other side. Before turning the tie inside out, we're just going to snip off that corner where we pivoted. This will just help it lay a bit flatter, as well as trim it down a little so it's not as bulky once turned right side out. Then it's time to turn it right side out and give it a quick press so that it's all laying nice and flat. Then with the remaining part of the bias that has been unsewn, we're going to fold it in on itself and then fold it again so that all the raw edges are neatly inside, pressing this into place and pinning, and then we are just going to sew along all of the edge of that bias to secure it in place, following it all the way along around that neckline. So the top part of the dress is nearly complete, however we do need to add the frill sleeves, which is what we're going to do now. So what you want to do on the bottom edge of the frill sleeve is roll a double hem and press this into place, pin it if you need to, and sew. Advice when using viscose is to dampen the material to help with a fold. To fold it once ½ centimeter and then ½ centimeter again, and sew along this, and hopefully, because it is a curve, you do get a nice neat finished edge. Then it is time to pin the edge of the sleeve to the shoulder edge, and there is a notch on the sleeve frill that will match up with the shoulder seam, and we're pinning this wrong sides together because we're French seaming this. There will be a little gap at the bottom, but this is supposed to be there because we're going to finish that bit with a little bit of bias as well. So sew that 1 centimeter seam all the way around, trimming it down again to past ½ centimeter, as well as the gap that is left. and ready to move on to the next step. So here I have already added in the bias binding to finish off that gap, and I will link Made Labels video down below if you want to see how this part was completed, but it's pretty much similar to the rest of the bias binding that was done previously. Then the top part of the dress is complete. So then it's time to work on the skirt part of the dress and connect the front and back panels of the skirt with some French seams once again, and this is what they will look like. Then you want to take the back panel piece of the skirt and mark the halfway mark and the quarter-way marks, as well as doing the same for the back panel piece of the top, so that's the halfway and quarter-way marks, because this will help us line it up when we are connecting them together. But to connect them together, you want to turn the stitch on your machine to the largest and sew 2 rows of gathering stitches along the back panel piece of the skirt, using the top 2 threads to slightly gather these in. Then you want to match up the halfway mark and quarter-way marks of the skirt, gathering these in so that they are even. And you also want to make sure that the 2 side seams of the top and skirt are lining up as well, pinning it all into place and making sure these are wrong sides together. There will be a gap at the front where the tie parts are, but that's fine, it's supposed to be there because it does have that peekaboo bit to the tie. So the top piece of the dress is placed inside the skirt, so the wrong sides are facing outwards. You're going to then carefully trim the seam allowances and fold over ½ centimetre all the way around, pressing it into place. Then you want to fold it over again to create a casing for the elastic, making sure that it's wide enough for your chosen elastic to sit comfortably. Then you're going to mark and leave a gap, sewing all the way around, back stitching at the start and end of where that gap is going to be, because this is where we're going to thread through the elastic for the waistband. For the elastic, I have just used my waist measurements and then added an extra centimetre so that it can have some give, and then threading it through that casing with a safety pin, pinning the other end to the gap so I don't lose it. And then once it is all the way through, trying it on, making sure that the elastic fits properly, sewing them into place, placing them inside and then closing up that gap. Then what you want to do is press the waistband away from the top so it's down toward the skirt, and then stretching the elastic, sewing this into place before moving on to the final step of the skirt frill. So the frill has so many pieces to it because it is a long piece of material. So the pattern piece does come with different labels so you know which part is which, and what you want to do is sew it all together with French seams, making sure all the right parts are connecting, and finishing off with a rolled hem along the bottom. Now I did this slightly wrong. I am doing the hem before connecting it all together. You want to connect it all together and then do the hem, but you know, it still turns out fine and it is not a problem. Like with connecting the top and skirt, we are going to use a similar method attaching the frill to the bottom of the skirt. So you need to mark the halfway and quarter-way marks on the front and back panels of the skirt as well as on the frill. Then sew 2 lines of gathering stitches along all around the frill edges before pinning them together, making sure everything lines up, the side seams line up, and sewing them into place with a French seam. Again, Made Label has a more in-depth way of doing this, so head to that if this is a little bit confusing. And once the skirt is attached to the frill, the dress is more or less complete. You just need to add in the hook and eye closures to the top, making sure that you measure these out equally and they are matching on either side, hand sewing the hook and eyes into place. Now you want to make sure that the hook is facing outwards and only going through the bias when attaching, so you don't want it coming through the outside. And then the tie front maxi dress is complete and ready to wear. how to make a tie front maxi dress, aka the Dusky Rose dress by Made Label, and I am in love with how this turned out. I mean, the fabric is just a gorgeous viscose, and what a stunning print. The fit of the dress is just perfect. There's none of that sort of awkward fitting where you've got to make sure it is figure hugging. It's a bit of a loose design but still looks elegant. I guess the only bit of fitting is that waistband, so it measures to you. But yes, it is just beautiful. Word of warning, with the hook and eye closures, you can add more if you need to, but you want to pinch the hook and eyes together once it's on because they will undo. Don't ask me how I know, but they will come undone, so make sure you pinch them a little bit. And you could also add buttons if you didn't want the hook and eye closure. The pattern piece is so versatile, and it's by Made Label, so this isn't sponsored, but I absolutely love their patterns. I've made the Frankie wrap skirt before, which is a free one when you sign up to their newsletter, and I can link that up above if you do want to check out the making of my Frankie wrap skirt as well as theirs down below. But yes, I would highly recommend checking out Made Label because they have some beautiful designs. I've got a few more in my stash that I have got waiting to be made. However, they're a bit more summery themed, so maybe they will have to wait till next summer since we are now coming out of summer. But let me know what you think of this dress in them comments below, and whether you've had a go at making the Dusky Rose or if this has given you inspiration to check it out and have a go yourself, then do let me know in them comments. And if you've enjoyed the video, then please do give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep up with all my creative and crafty antics coming up on the channel. And whilst you're there, hit that notification bell as well, because that will alert you each time my videos go live. I also have a blog, Ames's Antics, which is linked down below and up above for you to check out, because sometimes there's just a little bit more information over on the blog, and a little bit of the ins and outs of making this dress. And with that said, I will see you in the next video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and week and are able to do something creative and crafty, like maybe sewing the Dusky Rose, who knows. But whatever you choose to do, I hope you have a lovely week and happy crafting.